not stressed. We wake up with these ideas flourishing through our heads for Jackson, because we know Jackson is like a Shakespearean play, with tragedies, comedies, histories. But we also know Jackson like Maya Angelou, and still we rise. And Jackson still stands through the troubled waters. Jackson and the people, we still stand. Resilient, we are Jackson. We are each other's keeper, with our backs straight and heads high. Our dear old Jackson.
Welcome to our 2001 Mayoral Candidate Debate. The event is hosted by Women for Progress and our president, Ms. Willie Jones. The partners, Jackson Advocate, Jackson, Mississippi Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, Jackson Free Press, the Beta Delta Omega Chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, Mississippi Black Women's Roundtable, National Coalition of 100 Black Women, League of Women Voters, and NAACP Jackson Branch. We would also like to do an amazing, outstanding thank you to our rapid testing physicians who volunteered their services this evening. Dr. Ardarian Pierre of
Good evening, everyone, and welcome.
And Dr. David Pierre
Thank
of
you.
Baptist Hospital. Now I'd like to introduce our moderators. Our first moderator, Mr. Byron DeAndre Ori. Mr. Ori earned a BS in Business Administration from Mississippi Valley State University, an MPA from the University of Mississippi, an MA in Political Science from the State University of New York at Stony Brook, and a PhD from the University of New Orleans. He currently serves as a W.K. Catwalk Fellow with the Catwalk Foundation. In 2021, he was elected as the president-elect for the Southern Political Science Association. Upon receiving his PhD, he taught at the University of Mississippi. He was tenured and promoted to associate professor at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, and currently teaches at Jackson State University, where he serves as president and former chair of the Political Science Department. Professor Ori research is in the areas of race, politics, and social justice, focusing heavily on the psychology of Black trauma, implicit biases, voting rights, police reform, and systematic racism. He's conducted lectures at Oxford University, Yale University, and Spelman College, just to name a few. He's published over 30 peer reviews, scholarly articles, and book chapters, presented manuscripts at over 100 conferences, and received approximately $800,000 in research grants and fellowships to conduct research and mentor students. Dr. Ori serves as the director of the Jackson Political Science Research Laboratory. He's established a pipeline of students of color entering PhD programs. Just a little history, over the last 10 years, 18 of his former research assistants have enrolled in some of the top PhD programs across the country. In the fall of 2020, 3 of the lab's former students enrolled in the Maxwell School at Sarah Syracuse University. One student enrolled in the Kennedy School of Public Policy at Harvard and was a Rhodes Scholar finalist, and another completed a master's degree at Harvard. Some of his work has been published in the American Politics Research, Twin Research, and Human Genetics, State Politics, and Policy Quarterly, Social Science Quarterly, Journal of Women, Politics, and Policy, Race and Policy, and the Journal of Black Studies. Give me just a moment of celebration, all rounds of applause in your home for Professor Ori. Our next moderator is Ms. Donna Ladd. Donna Ladd is the founding editor and the co-founder of the Jackson Free Press, which turns 19 in September. The Mississippi State graduate also co-founded and now edits the new statewide Mississippi Free Press, which launched in March of 2020, as well as the Mississippi Youth Media Project, which will return after the COVID crisis. She was a KW Catalog Leadership Fellow for Mississippi and has had journalism grants through the John Jay College of Criminal Justice, the Solution Journalism Network, the Carey Institution for Global Good, and the Packard Foundation. Ms. Ladd was selected as one of the 2020 Alumni Award winners from the Columbia Graduate School of Journalism, where she earned her master's degree. Her and her team's journalism helped put a Klan member in prison and a Jackson mayor on trial 2 times. She's won close to 100 awards for her work. She considers herself a warrior for this capital city, evidence-based solutions, and especially Jackson's young people. Thank you to both of our moderators. If you will give them both a round of applause. Thank you. Thank you for joining us for tonight's debate, featuring candidates for the race for mayor of the city of Jackson. Presenting to you live from downtown Jackson at the Mississippi College School of Law. Sincere gratitude to Dean Patricia Bennett for allowing us to host tonight's debate at your venue. I am Crystal Welch, and I am the co-host and coordinator for tonight's debate. We are currently facing unprecedented challenges in coping with the coronavirus pandemic. At this time, I would like to briefly address our compliance with COVID-19 safety protocols. Although we are present tonight for a live debate, all persons present for tonight's debate were provided a COVID-19 rapid test immediately prior to the beginning of tonight's debate. The number of candidates present in the room have been restricted. All candidates are distanced at least 6 feet apart. All candidates must wear a mask when they are not speaking, and once they finish speaking, they are required to return the mask to cover their faces. Additionally, we have equipped each podium with plexiglass dividers to further protect each candidate. It is an honor at this time to introduce to you tonight's candidates. First, let us welcome Mr. Ponto Downing. Mr. Downing, if you will approach and take the podium. Stairs to ascend to the microphone.
I can maneuver this. I'm not that way.
Perfect.
down, the R stands for running, not really Republican. Born in downtown Jackson, and proud of that. Born in a house, the street was called Robert Dale, because coincidentally my uncle, first Mississippian killed in World War I. That neighborhood was a very diverse neighborhood. My neighbors on two sides are African American. So that was 1945, a long time ago. But I guess the way to describe me best and comply with time restraints, but to get me started, you can't shut me up, would be a Jew by blood, Jesus freak. All my directions, everything that I believe, comes from the King James Bible. That's what you get. So that makes people nervous. That's the fact. And, after I've lived in New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, Atlanta, New Orleans, everywhere. But Jackson is my roots. I love the city. I have 20 streets and buildings named for us. So it's my roots, and it will be. And it's way past time for the city to be clean and safe. We need to guarantee it's 2021. It's not like 2020. No matter what happens with COVID-19. It can be clean and safe, and rather than 130 homicides, it could be 29 or 30. I think we're probably at that already, so I might be pushing it with that. But it can be controlled, I guarantee you it can. And I'm the person who can guarantee that. I don't just promise it, I guarantee it. It will be a clean, safe city. It will be the cleanest, safest city, if not in America, in Mississippi.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Shokwe Atar Azuma, please give us your introduction.
Good evening. My name is Shokwe Antar Lumumba, and I have the distinct honor and pleasure of serving as the mayor of the city of Jackson. It has been the professional honor of my life. I am a lawyer by training, but more important than that, I am the son of two community activists. My parents made the best decision in my life when I was about 5 years old, to move our family to Jackson, Mississippi, because they were committed to work. They were committed to building a community of self-determination, a community where opportunity is abound for all of us. And so they felt so strongly towards that effort that they thought that they could not shield their parents from that effort, that they thought they could not shield their children, from that effort, and that they needed to give their most precious resource to that work. And I'm grateful for that. And so I look forward to how we build a city of dignity, build a dignity economy which reflects the inherent dignity of every city, every single resident. Thank you to the organizers for having us today. I look forward to talking about the success we have seen in our city, but also I look forward to talking about where we will go looking forward. Understanding that while we have been able to accomplish things that we have not either done ever or in quite some time, we are still not satisfied. And I look forward to the collective genius of all of our residents helping to pursue that goal.
Thank you. Mr. Kenneth Wilson, please give us your introduction.
Thank you. I'm Kenneth Wilson. I'm a proud lifelong Jacksonian. I grew up in Ward 3 in Georgetown, community where my mother lives. I am Jackson. I'm a husband to my wife for 20 years, my two beautiful daughters. I'm a product of Jackson Public Schools. I attended Johnson Elementary, Brinkley Middle School, and Lanier High School. I am a graduate of Hines Community College where I serve as Department of Business Administration Chair. I'm a graduate of Business Administration, the MBA from Belhaven University. I've held positions as the Parent Teacher Association President. I am the Vice President of the Better Tomorrow Foundation. I am the President of the Ridgeville Park Neighborhood Association. I have served this city for 10 years as a public servant. I am Jackson. I thank you all for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight, and I look forward to this debate.
Thank you. Before we turn the debate over to our esteemed moderators, we would like to discuss tonight's format. Our questions come from our viewers, our Women for Progress partners, and our moderators. Each candidate will be given 3 full minutes to respond to each question asked by the moderator. No rebuttals will be allowed. However, should a candidate choose to respond to another candidate's response, they may use a portion of their 3 minutes to address their concern. But they will be reminded to respond to the question asked within the allotted time.
The moderators may use their discretion to request rebuttal for clarity when deemed necessary. We have a timekeeper present who will ensure that the candidates remain within their time. Our timekeeper is Juanita Stewart Brown. Ms. Brown will display a yellow sign when the speaker has 30 seconds remaining. She will display a red sign when the speaker is out of time. In the event that a candidate is mid-sentence when your time runs out, we will allow you to complete your sentence. Now, at this time, I will turn over the debate to our moderators. Thank you.
Hello, and welcome to the 2021 Jackson Mayoral debate. Hello to the candidates. We're very pleased to be your moderators tonight. Let's see. The only thing I'll add to what Crystal said about the questions kind of from our perspective, can you hear me okay? I can take this off. Is that they are forward-thinking and focused on potential solutions for our city and its citizens. We urge the candidates to avoid personal attacks of each other, instead focusing their time on telling the citizens why and how they are the best choice for mayor. We reserve the right to interrupt attacks or to ask for attribution of questionable statements or what we deem to be, quote, fake news. We will not allow personal attacks. It's good that I'm loud. I think y'all can hear me. So we hope for an enlightening conversation with ideas for the city's future, and we urge viewers out there to participate in civil conversation in the chat on the live stream, although we are not monitoring it for questions tonight. So we'll get started. Our first block of questions tonight, or first block is about, guess what? Infrastructure and water. Currently, we are dealing with one of the most serious crises in our nation. Over the last few days, two of our leading state officials made the following comments regarding Jackson's water crisis. Governor Reeves stated, quote, "It's really important that the city of Jackson start collecting their water bill payments before they start going and asking everyone else to pony up more money." And Lieutenant Governor Hoseman stated, "The prime mover needs to be the city itself. It's the city of Jackson. Where do you start? What are the most complicated places? What's your plan? How much money is it going to take? And how do you even pay for it? I haven't seen any of that." So we'll start with Mayor Lumumba. How can you get the full support of the state to deal with our water crisis, and what is underway to try to do that?
Well, first and foremost, let me begin by expressing my sincere regret and my sincere thoughts to all of those residents who are dealing without water for this prolonged period of time. As we know, that we've been dealing with infrastructure problems in the city of Jackson for some time. In fact, that highlights the trouble that there is with the statements that you just articulated. The fact that resources are stripped from the city of Jackson historically, the city of Jackson is the highest contributor to state revenue. The fact that we don't get payment in lieu of taxes, even though a large sum of the buildings downtown are state facilities. Even though if there was a fire in the state building, they would expect the city of Jackson to put it out. And so I hope that we can demonstrate operational unity, focus more on our common ends and objectives than our differences in our effort to improve the city of Jackson's infrastructure. What we've been able to do over the past 4 years is we've been able to inject money and opportunity in our infrastructure in a way that hasn't been done in the previous 10 years combined. However, our issues with our infrastructure are abundant and more work needs to be done. So what we were able to do is leverage our 1% sales tax in order to get somewhere in the neighborhood of $40 million to go towards our infrastructure. And we need to be able to do the same so that we can tackle our critical water infrastructure. I think that it is important when someone stands up here today talking to you, that they don't just speak of the problem, that they speak with a depth of knowledge as to what that problem is. I can tell you what the costs are. I can tell you that I have penned a letter to the governor speaking to him about this issue, that we have a meeting set up, and that we're going to continue to work in that way. And I can also share with you that I have a history of being able to move beyond party lines and differences in order to make things happen. We were able to do that with the school district And I believe that we're going to be able to do it with our infrastructure as well.
Mr. Wilson?
Thank you. 3 years ago, my wife and I received a letter from the city of Jackson saying the water is not safe to drink for pregnant women or children under the age of 5. And here we are 3 years later with the same problem. My mom, like many Jacksonians, are plagued without water, plagued with high water bills, and we're still at square one 3 years prior. We need a solution. People are suffering. We need a solution. It is imperative that we work with our state legislators and our governor, our executive branch of the government. There is no way forward for the city of Jackson if there is not a rapport with all politicians in this state. But regardless of who you are, how you vote, Republican, Democrat, or Independent, you're still impacted by this water crisis. You just are. In my administration, we will have a master plan. We will pursue all options, a few such as the Stanford Act, which is for disaster relief and emergency assistance. We're going to pursue all options to bring relief to the citizens of Jackson so we don't have to go through this again. Thank you.
Mr. Downer?
I own 3 properties in Jackson, 3 houses. I did. None of them had water. Haven't had water in 7 years, but I'll get into that later. I'm delighted to be here. I thank the group for inviting me. I'm the lone Republican, but I think as a Republican, I reflect starkly the wishes, politics of 2/3 of the state. I'm not a Ronald Reagan Republican. I'm not a Dwight Eisenhower Republican. I'm not a Donald Trump Republican. I am a Tate Reeves Republican. Because last time I checked, he's in charge. So I'm going to comply with him. I got to speak to Antar before the meeting, and I heard on the TV tonight, $47 million he's requested. That's a drop in the bucket. That's not going to fix it. I can get $470 million. Real simple way to do that. Sell the airport. Simple. Be nice. Comply with Tate Reeves, who's the governor. Fix this city for the benefit of the citizens, not for the benefit of the Democratic Party or the NAACP or ACLU or whatever. For the citizens who live here, they've been shortchanged forever. 1963, I marched with Medgar Evers. I walked the walk. I lived in Doodleville. I saw the discrimination. And I guarantee you it's a lot worse today than it was in 63. I think about 375 murders in the last 4 years in the Antar-Lumumba administration. That is not acceptable. We've got to address that. Obviously, infrastructure. I used to work in the governor's mansion in 1967, and every morning, there's the governor, John Bell Williams, having a conversation with 6-term mayor, Alan Thompson. It didn't matter whether the money to fix Jackson's problems were city, state, county, federal, or otherwise. Jackson was cared for. But now, the mayor of Jackson, unfortunately, and the governor of Mississippi have become enemies to the fact that lawsuits have been made. If I'm mayor of Jackson, I drop every lawsuit. We comply with Tate Reeves, whatever that means, because that is the only way we're going to fix the city. It's going to take a lot of money, probably billions. We have, I think, a $1.5 billion consent decree on the water alone. We owe HUD about $2.5 billion. And yet the last time HUD came here with Donald Trump and Dr. Ben Carson to dedicate the Civil Rights Museum, they were boycotted. That is not the way to get things done. Obviously, as a Republican, I comply, mask, whatever, but we get the city fixed for the sake of the citizens. Thank you.
Miller, did you want to respond to that?
Yes, I do. I think that there are 2 very important points to clarify. First and foremost, when Ben Carson came, I actually sat and had dinner with him in the governor's office. And so I have no problem with sitting across the table with anyone who will help us. But the more we articulate that the solution to Jackson's problems is to continue to give in to the extortion of those who want to strip resources that benefit the city of Jackson, resources that we have invested in. We talked about, I'm going to have a plan. I'm going to make sure that I use the Stafford Act, and I'm reading at it, looking, and because I just became familiar with it a moment ago, not knowing that the city of Jackson has always made sure that we look at state and federal partners. In fact, coincidentally, when you talk about the issue of working with the governor, I sat down with the lieutenant governor to talk about Jackson's infrastructure policy. We had a conversation that lasted for about an hour and a half, and he asked everyone to leave the room, only to say, Mayor, I need you to give me my airport. And I look at it for about $30 million. So not only am I supposed to be dumb, I'm supposed to be cheap, right? So we're not looking at how we protect those resources and understand that Jackson's benefit is the state of Mississippi's benefit. When we talk about how we improve our infrastructure and how we pay for those things, we talk about difficult decisions, like going to get $90 million back in order to repair our water infrastructure that has been taken advantage of. The fact that residents get bad bills is something that we have been seeing for quite some time. And so if you're going to talk about those issues, I need you to talk about them with a depth of knowledge that you actually understand what the challenge truly is and how we solve those. Simply saying I'm going to have a master plan is not a solution. I've listened to your plan, and what your plan lacks is an actual plan.
So as a follow-up, as Mayor Lumumba stated, Jackson does have some of its own resources for infrastructure. Mayor Lumumba, we'll start with you. Can you please talk about how the settlement from the Siemens lawsuit, some $90 million or so for the city, has been or should be invested into repairing the water sewer infrastructure? And then specifically, how have these funds been leveraged? You mentioned that they have been leveraged. For example, have we sought and received federal funding, et cetera?
Well, thank you for that question. And when I said that we leveraged, it wasn't the 1%. It wasn't the $90 million that we leveraged. We did the first ever leveraging of a 1% in the state of Mississippi's history in order to get $40 million. The $90 million is the exact dollar to the point of what it cost for that contract, the most expensive contract in our city's history. And so when we went after that lawsuit, we recovered the largest settlement in our city's history, even after you paid our attorneys. And so to understand that challenge, what we are dealing with is twofold. One, we had to replenish the funds that the city of Jackson had to borrow from our general fund because our enterprise fund has been suffering for years. We have been losing approximately $20 million annually within our enterprise fund, making it impossible not only to see the repairs that we needed to do, but also struggling with regular operation and maintenance costs. And so what we were able to do is pay back the financial, the borrow that we took from the general fund, making certain, for a number of reasons why we had to do that. One, we had to, for the state auditor, anytime you borrow from your general fund, then you have to put that money back. Secondly, we did so because of our insurance companies that insure our enterprise fund bonds. Had we failed to do that, what we would have been challenged with is that our bonds would have been callable, making us responsible for approximately $300 million to be paid up front, sending the city into bankruptcy. Furthermore, as we have done with a number of issues, we brought in the community. We hosted community conversations so the community could know how we plan to use the residual of those funds. What we have to understand is that if we don't fix the system, then we will be revisiting this same issue 4 years from now, 8 years from now, 12 years from now. And so what is happening right now is that we have issued the bids or allowed bids to be issued and how we're going to repair those systems. We have hired a project manager, which was not the case when the first project was done, and we're going to ensure that we do it correctly. We can't even have this conversation today about how we fix our water system had it not been for the Lumumba administration and the work of the people to fight for this money back. Lastly, what I will say, we recognize the struggle of our residents. We recognize those individuals who have received stranded bills, no bills for a long or extended period of time, making it difficult for them to pay those bills. We also understand that state law prohibits us from being able to forgive those bills. And so we created a legislative package that was unanimously supported, talking about working across the aisle, unanimously supported from both the House and the Senate. I can't remember the last time that Jackson had a bill that was supported by everyone, only to see the governor veto. Now, since that time, I have sat down with the governor. I've taken the opportunity to understand his discontent with certain portions, and I believe we have come to a solution that as the bill moves forward today, that we will be able to cause or create the relief for our residents that they so desperately need.
Thank you, Mayor Lumumba. At this time, we're going to have to take a short break for technical difficulties.
Mr. Wilson, we got a light shining right over your head that comes across on Facebook.
Okay.
What direction can we move in, George?
Fixable.
Either way, away from the light. Well, that makes
Do we need to move him over or?
No, that fixed it. When he turned it off, that
Okay,
fixed it.
okay. And, just to make sure when you finish talking, you should put your mask over. We can keep breathing into the mic.
Yeah, I know.
Yes.
But I was just kind of keeping track.
I think there's been a couple of times when you've been breathing in the mic, and the others talking.
Too close?
I think he just
No,
removed it a
just,
whole lot
when you
right there.
put your mask back on, and just make sure it's not right over the mic where the others are talking. Okay?
Okay.
All right.
We're going to go with 30 seconds rebuts. If you have a rebut, 30
Make
seconds.
sure.
Yeah, it's the same for everybody. We're gonna get the time worked out, evened out. Okay.
I'm glad you have this, the shield, because I splashed out there.
I'm glad we do too.
Make sure you keep your mic on, okay?
Okay. Oh, because I turned it off, just have it. Okay. Apologies. He said he's ready. Are you next? Or you got to?
One second.
They're ready to proceed.
One second.
Oh,
I'm ready. So as we resume, I'd like to direct these questions to first Mr. Plantos Downing and then Mr. Wilson. So based on that follow-up, I'm going to restate the question, but of course you weren't an incumbent, so it'll be a little different. So as a follow-up, Jackson does have some of its own resources for infrastructure. Please talk about how the settlement from the Seaman lawsuit, some $90 million so for the city and $30 million actually for attorneys, should be invested in repairing water sewer infrastructure. And specifically, how should these funds be leveraged? For example, should they be leveraged for federal funding? And if so, give us examples of how you would leverage those funds. We'll start with you, Mr. Dowd.
Thank you. Well, I've known Siemens for 40 years. I've done business with them. And I'm not privy to everything that goes on. I do know that the lawsuit was $450 million. That was the original amount of the lawsuit. So whatever it was, maybe Antar can address it. I think we wind up with, correct me if I'm wrong, a $90 million settlement, but I think about $30 million went to a Birmingham law firm. Correct me if I'm wrong. We didn't wind up with much money, but when you file a lawsuit, I'm not an attorney, I'm a smart attorney. When you file a lawsuit, everybody loses. There's court costs and the attorney gets paid. You sell this stuff, backroom politics, whatever you want to call it. You get on the same page, as I referred to it. For the last 30 years, Republicans have run the state. We have one aberration called Ronnie Musgrove, and that was because of the antics of Kirk Fordyce. After his 8 years, we had 4 years of Ronnie Musgrove and nothing got done. Since then, it's been Republican. I'm willing to go along with whatever games they play, whatever policies they come up with, anything I can do to make the citizens of Jackson, Mississippi safe and make it a clean city with, I think it was Tony Yarborough, that had billboards, taste the tap, water that was contaminated with feces, lead, everything. I first noticed this in 1985 when I started to run for the city council. I was in the fire department. I saw the Kentwood water. And I said, do y'all put out fires with Kentwood water? He said, no, we drink it. I would let my dogs drink Jackson water. This was Mr. Tony, the head of the fire department. Then I looked into it. And I found out that the infrastructure was 50 years old. It was 50 years old in 1985. Can you imagine how bad it is now? It's terrible. And we need to do whatever we can do. And that means not being antagonistic with $450 million lawsuits. The state budget is only $7 billion. I'm not so sure Antar is correct when he said Jackson is contributing the largest amount. I thought it was the casinos who gave the largest amount to the state. I could be wrong. But again, we've got to be nice, friendly, do whatever we can, not file lawsuits, to make this city, again, clean and safe. It's a simple solution. Thank you.
So clearly, we are still where we were after the city's lawsuit was settled. People are still without water. We still have high water bills. There's still sewage in the yards of these homeowners. And we're tired of it. The citizens are tired of it. We can tout the relationships, or the lack thereof, with the government. But there should be an ongoing relationship with all state legislators, the executive branches, and all in this state. And that is the reason why Jackson is in the condition that it's in. This current administration has allowed the situation to worsen, and it's apparent. So when he said we got $90 million, and they get $30 million to the law, which is unheard of, but we're still in the same condition. So what I would say, I would work with our legislative branch, our city council, and my chief of staff to make sure that we are using those monies the best way we know how. We have to give the people some relief. We still have $1,000 water bills. We still have elderly people who have to decide between buying medicine or paying a high water bill. This is not rocket science, people. This is common sense. People are suffering. So when a politician or the current administration touts a lawsuit that's the most expensive in the history of the city, we are still at square one. People are still suffering. Elders cannot drink the water. We're still in a bad position. And we're going to be there when we leave this debate tonight. People are suffering right now as we speak. There's a mother who can't make formula for her child because the water is not clean. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be a leader first and lead these people out of these issues.
If I may, let me follow up with you just for like 30 seconds, because I think we owe you and Mr. Downing a little time, so we'll try to make some of that up as we go. How are you going, what would you do differently going forward? Well, at this moment, how would you deal with the situation that the city is in right now?
Preparation. I think preparation is the first thing we're supposed to do before we even get to it. We can't continue to kick the can down the road. This administration doesn't have a plan. They're doing it as we go. So what I would do is I would take the advice of our public works director and whoever wants an analysis on the city where we are in a data-driven plan. That hasn't been done, clearly. We're 4 years into this administration. We're still where we were square one 3 years ago. So it has to be a data-driven plan. That's what I would do, and I would take the advice of the specialists that understand infrastructure in the city.
Okay, 30 seconds.
Yes, I appreciate that, and I thank you for your follow-up, because what your question reveals is that there is no plan. What your question reveals is that he's saying, well, I'm going to do the best thing that there is to do, and I'm going to have a plan, and I'm going to follow the advice of our public works directors. Well, I think that everybody follows the advice of their public works directors, and as you talk about the unheard of cost of an attorney, ask any attorney, myself being one and understanding, that a 33 1/3 is a standard cost for an attorney's firm to be paid. In fact, in many instances, in Macomb, Mississippi, the same law firm that represented us charged 40%. And so when they're willing to put up $1 million in order to defend our case, there weren't a line of attorneys firms willing to support us. And that is why you see, and I'll finish this last point. It is important to also realize that we talk about $400 million. You always throw out the highest number that you can. If Siemens was going to be willing to settle for $400 million, they would just go to court.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Do you want 30 seconds, Mr.
Sure.
Downing? Okay, 30 seconds, though.
Well,
And then I'm moving to the next question.
I answered the question.
But you get 30 seconds.
The plan is to comply with the governor of the state. There's money everywhere. But you gotta be nice. It's not complicated. You can't file lawsuits against the governor and expect him to write you a check. And again, it doesn't matter to fix Jackson if it's state money, federal money, county money, city money. It should not matter. This is the capital. The capital of the state. It should be, again, the safest water, the best water, the cleanest city, the most beautiful city. Not complicated. But we turned our government, which is democratic, into the enemy of the state. And there's an undeclared war, believe it or not, on white people. The city is only 15% black.
Okay, Mr.
The
Downing,
school
I think you're
district is 99% black.
Okay.
That's not integrated.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, so I'm moving to the next question here. That is kind of related to infrastructure, but it's kind of getting into a leadership question as well, okay? A perennial complaint that we've heard, in our newsroom from people of Jackson for decades now, okay, we're not talking about years, but are about slow response times to problems, such as, examples, open sewage near their homes, poor communication about the causes and the planned response to the issue. And then this was also a complaint that has surfaced during the early days of this water crisis, okay, about communication. So considering that the infrastructure and COVID-19 crises may not be over soon here, I would like each of you to talk specifically about how you as the mayor will personally lead the city facing these crises moments. What will you do specifically? And I don't think I've started with you, Mr. Downing, so we'll start with you on this question.
Repeat the question.
That was a long question. No, so what's your leadership style? I mean, how would you lead people through crises? What's your, what do you see your role as people are going through very difficult issues?
Well, if I can be candid, I don't want to be the mayor of Jackson. Not at all. My next step is to run for Congress. But the motivation for running for Congress is to make Jackson clean and safe. I'd like somebody else to do the work. I'll be 77. I want to play golf. My golden years. But I'm not going to stand by and let this city continue to decay, which it has under Antar. If Antar, let me be frank and candid, if he would renounce his Democratic Party affiliation, NAACP, ACLU, Urban League, whatever that is, he can continue to be the mayor. I'll just be a fundraiser. I will try to get the budget doubled, whatever it is. I think it's $500 million. You can't run the city on $500 million.
We're not really talking about leadership here.
That's leadership, fundraising.
Yeah, but so you're saying that fundraising would be?
Yes, I'm the guy that they pat on the head and write a check to.
Okay. Let's go to Mr. Lewis, and then we'll go to Mr. Lamont.
Wilson is his name.
I'm sorry?
Wilson.
Wilson, I'm sorry. Why am I doing that? I apologize for that.
Thank you. Well, I'm a professional servant. I've served the city in various ways, public safety, and also as a neighborhood association president. So I've seen the many issues, or the lack thereof, of response to the issues that are plaguing my community. You can ask Ms. Flores in Ridgeville Park, who is now waiting a year to get a response to sewage in her yard, and she's about to sell her home. I am a servant. I understand the people. I respond by serving, by making sure that my staff is prepared to respond, and we don't have to wait years or weeks on end for someone to answer the phone. We are also in the public safety process. When you call 911, if you can get through, it's taking a 30-minute average response for someone to come help. And they're prioritizing where they should go. We are in a public safety crisis and a water crisis at the same time in the city. And this administration has absolutely done nothing to respond to these people's cries for help. So I'm a servant leader, and that's the type of way I'm going to lead. That's the type of police chief I'll have, and all 9 departments will be served.
I apologize again for calling you the wrong last name. I'm not sure what happened to my brain right there. Mayor Mumba, please take the question, but I do want to say that you know that my newspaper reported on a particular sewage issue, for instance, that went on for months and months. We have reported on things within this administration and before, so it's not picking on you. But, you know, when people are going through those things, what have you learned that you can use in the next 4 years here, as mayor, if you continue?
Well, I appreciate that because I've learned quite a bit. People have to understand why there's a lack of response is because there's a lack of resources. When you don't get the money that you need from your water bills, that is the money that goes into those infrastructure tasks. And so as we've been able to use the 1%, there also was written into the master plan that it could not be used for sewage issues. And so that is why, going back to an earlier question, why it is so important that we use the residual funds from the Siemens lawsuit in order to fix the problem. By fixing the problems, not only are you able to assure residents that you're able to meet their needs, but you're also able to assure that we won't find ourselves back into the same problem. And I thank you for the question of how you will deal with the crisis. First and foremost, I will speak to my leadership staff. I believe in collective genius. Anyone standing up here before you today that says that I will be able to do this and I can come to the solutions, whether it's with infrastructure or crime, clearly don't understand what it takes to build a team of people, a team of community that comes together in order to support the solutions. I can also say that this is an administration that has been hit with every single crisis that you can imagine within a 4-year period of time. We started off with the school district. We're able to save the school district from state takeover. Then we had our first winter freeze in 2018, had to lead our community out of that. Then we were faced with a 30-year flood, had to lead our community out of that. We've been dealing with a 100-year pandemic. We had to author solutions, in fact, leading the state often with the policies we created. The first ones to say that we were going to have a mask mandate. Not only authoring solutions in that way, but creating convalescence homes for our rooms, for our community, for our residents, so that they can quarantine safely and not endanger loved ones. We were able to buy 12,000 tests. We created a symptom tracker to get a census tract understanding of where the virus is most prevalent. We created a warm line, understanding that this was going to create mental havoc and mental health issues on our residents. All of those things, we were able to offer the solutions. And so this administration, as we deal with the current crisis or any other crisis, we have demonstrated our mettle, that we communicate. In fact, we are the first administration to make sure that we have a press conference every week to ensure you and to talk about what's going on. And so we continue to communicate and we continue to work with our community in every possible way.
Okay, we're going to move into economic development and jobs. We've seen quite a bit of development, in Northeast Jackson, and that's year after year after year. What are your specific plans to help improve economic development in other areas across the city? Mr. Wilson, we'll start with you.
Sure, I think economic development is imperative. I live in Northeast Jackson clearly, and I've seen progress, but I also work with the firemen in South Jackson and see any progress over the last 4 years. I think we definitely need to have a relationship with our industry. That has not been the case. We have businesses leaving at a high rate. We have businesses leaving for reasons they should be leaving. I think my job as mayor would be able to appoint a liaison to have a relationship with those businesses. Be able to have a rapport with our colleges to make sure we're creating a workforce that would entice those industries to come here, where we can put economic development areas like Highway 18, Industrial Drive, and Highway 80. But we also have to address crime. I met with investors a few weeks back, and two primary things they talked about was crime and infrastructure. If we're truly interested in developing anything in the city, we have to address the criminal element, we have to improve our educational system, and we have to fix the infrastructure. So those are the areas that I look to invest in when I come in.
Mayor Lumumba.
Yes. Once again, the response is that we have to have a relationship with investors. What we've been able to do in terms of economic development is first correct the city's financial condition. When we came into office, our city was had a $12 million shortfall. We had a bond rating that was continuing to decrease. We were balancing our city's budget off of our employees by furloughing them. we were able to turn our $6 million shortfall into a $12 million surplus. We are able to increase or get positive reviews on our bond rating with not one credit agency, but two, S&P and Moody's. We were able to increase property evaluations for the first time in 18 years. And so what we were able to do this by is not only demonstrating fiscal responsibility, being able to make certain that we spent money correctly and that we work with our bond rating agencies, which is important and critical for economic development. We also created those councils that my opponent is speaking to. We created a P20 council to work with not only colleges, but work with teachers in JPS. In that P20 council, it's not talking about preschool to graduate school. We're talking about prenatal to graduate school. We also created the city's first CEO roundtable discussion, understanding that for the first time in our city's history, it was the first time that we had brought the collection of the 50 largest employers in our city's history into the same room so that we can talk about how we supported them. We have also hired those firms, and we have created the partnership within our planning and development department that actually now goes to those businesses to talk about what their challenges are and how we retain them and how we work for more opportunities. And so the things that we're talking about are things that we have done. I think that it is also important that we understand that most people don't believe in what you're building until you build it yourself. When we've seen the economic development taking place in Northeast Jackson, that's a matter of people seeing a community which they believe is investor-ready. There have been other communities, our communities, in Highway 18 and Highway 80 that have been divested in. And that means that the city needs to have a financial standing so that we can infuse the capital to make those opportunities take place. And so it's important that you fix the city's financial well-being in order to do that. I'm proud of the development that we've seen happen because it's been a long time since we've seen almost every building on Capitol Street with someone in it. But what I am not proud of, or what I'm not satisfied with, rather, is that it is not inclusive development. We need to be able to see development all across our city, and one of those ways we can achieve that is through cooperative enterprise. Sometimes your ability in order to fill your own gaps makes it dangerous not to invest in the city of Jackson. And so that is one of the pillars of what I believe that my administration has to do going forward, is make sure that we strengthen the opportunity now that we have improved our financial standing as a city, so that we can see the economic development take place all over town.
Mr. Downing.
Thank you. I really am trying to be nice. You know, Donna said don't attack. Okay, I'm trying to be nice. I really am. I'm a Christian. I'm supposed to love my neighbors myself. 3 times Antar has mentioned the schools. The Jackson Public Schools, my ex-wife worked there 33 years. My aunt worked there 41 years. I graduated honor student in 1963. And what did Jackson want to do to Central High School? They want to tear it down. That's what they wanted to do. That's not him, obviously. It was Harvey Johnson and that group. It's not. It's now a state building. It's a beautiful building. It was 89% like it did 60 years ago when I was there. But economic development, gosh, there is none. We have less jobs in Jackson, Mississippi today than we had 60 years ago. Highway 80, General Electric, 3,000 employees. Packard Electric, 5,000 employees. Not on Highway 80, but close. That's my motto, 80 by 80. I'll be 80 in 3 or 4 years. And hopefully Highway 80 is going to look like it did then. Stripling is gone. Coca-Cola's gone. They're all gone. The only thing there now is an abandoned motel that's been abandoned for 25 years. It's owned by Pearl Street Methodist Church, and nobody's done anything but say, oh, how sad. We tear it down or do something. We get jobs. And again, my yard sign says, reopen Jackson, close the clinic. That means to reopen the city. No restrictions, no masks, whatever Tate Reeves says. Close the clinic means we close 2903, Mississippi's only abortion clinic. We will never move forward until we stop murdering 3,000 babies a year. And for your information, 98% are black.
You gonna link that to economic development?
Yes, that's economic development. Of course it is. How about Chattanooga, Tennessee, our sister city? Have you been to Chattanooga lately? 21 homicides last year. Jobs and no abortion clinic. You better believe it's connected.
Did
okay,
I
go ahead, Ms. Wilson.
Go ahead, please.
Sure. Just to add to the point about schools, the mayor consistently talks about saving the Jackson Public School District. And we've had failing grade. As an educator, He touted that I'm the only educator on this stage. We have 7 schools closed. That's nothing to brag about. And they're in black and brown communities in South Jackson. In addition to the $1.6 million that he reallocated for the Highway 18 investment fund from the Grand Gulf. He has not invested one time that $1.6 million. So he's not interested in developing Highway 8 or Highway 18.
If I may, first and foremost, the $1.6 million is sitting in an account for Highway 80 right now. And so as we try to build opportunities, it is present. And so I think it's important that we come here with actual facts. I think it's also important, first of all, I want to be clear. And if I said it incorrectly, then please forgive me. I did not personally save our school district. I work with community. We knocked on we knocked on 60,000 doors to talk with community about what their vision for their Jackson Public School District was. Talking about working across party lines, we work with the governor so that we can talk about how we save that. And in fact, another fact that we have to be clear on, prior to us being able to save the school district, it had a failing grade. We actually improved the grade with Jackson Public Schools in between the period in which we were able to create the Better Together Commission, working to create not only opportunity with a new school board, but with new leadership.
So when we talk about economic development, one issue that we've not heard much about in recent months is the zoo. And so the Jackson Zoo is a victim of the surrounding blight, which increased after black and white and economic flight from the area. Attorney Lumumba, what are your plans for the zoo? And would you consider moving the zoo?
Yes.
If so, why?
So, in fact, we have a firm that won the bid for the zoo, and so we intend to present that. There was some details over the contract that both the council and the firm wanted to talk about, and so we intend to present that again soon. But what we need to know about the zoo is that the previous operator not only misappropriated funds, used bond funds inappropriately, which honestly could be criminal, but certainly did not benefit the zoo. We talk about the zoo, and we use reductive analysis and say that the only way that we can save the zoo is to take it out of the community in which it is in. But yet, and still, when we have special events like the Zoo Brew, when we have special events like Ice Cream Safari, we see huge numbers come out. We hadn't actually looked at the data to see how the zoo can succeed where it is. I can tell you right now, we have under contract repair of the infrastructure on Capitol Street set to take place. That we are going to be demolishing 130 homes thereabout in the Capitol Street area in order to support the zoo. So what we need to be able to do is understand that we can't continue to rob every resource out of communities and talk about how we're serious about seeing all Jacksonians thrive. We're one city with one aim and one destiny, and if you live in South Jackson or if you leave out of South Jackson, then there's going to be an increased burden on someone who lives in North Jackson. And so I believe that the way and the path forward for the zoo is to have a firm that can bring new opportunities. We've talked about how we improve the exhibit at the zoo. We've talked about how we can now market the zoo. If McDonald's chose not to market their hamburgers, if they chose to strip what they offer, then they would suffer as well. We don't even market to our children, and that has been what has been taking place under the prior leadership for years. And so we're building new opportunity for the zoo right where it is.
When do you think the zoo will be open?
The zoo is open already.
Okay.
The zoo. In fact, under our improvements that we were able to do, the interest in the zoo was so great that we actually had to turn people away based on COVID restrictions. And so we know that we can build an opportunity with the zoo. I want to restore the roar. I want to see animals that I was able to appreciate when I was a child. Seeing a lion at the zoo. When I take my little girls, I have 2 little girls, a 7-year-old soon and a 3-year-old soon, here in the month of March. They are looking for the animals that they see on TV. They want to see a lion. They want to see an elephant. And so part of that is partnering with a firm who not only has a zoo in Dubai, but has operated aquariums that have managed exhibits at United Kingdom. If they can handle United Kingdom, I think that they're fit to handle the Jackson Zoo.
Mr. Wilson, are you familiar with the accreditation process at the zoo? And what would your plans be to enhance the visibility of the zoo, one, to attract, visitors? And then, when you think about moving the zoo?
Right, so the zoo is a complex issue. I agree that, it's in an area that needs revitalization. But let me be clear, no one is going to the zoo. We have to be honest. If you had to ask the question, when will the zoo be open? No one is going. Why would you attempt to go to a zoo that doesn't have access to the animals that you like to see? Most people are afraid to go because they think they're going to be harmed by gun violence. So we have to consider everything. The areas around the zoo, I was just there this week on Jane Avenue cleaning up. It looks deplorable. The mayor said he's going to tear down 130 homes. We have a lot of tearing down to do. That community is in need also. They're plagued with crime. They're also plagued with sewage in their homes. So I would do whatever's best for the city. I would also talk to our city council to make sure we're making the best decision. But we're not getting a return on our investment. If we're just paying for operating costs, we're just throwing money away, wasteful spending. So we're going to do an analysis, an audit on how these funds are being allocated to make sure we're doing what's best for the zoo, but also what's best for our budget in the city of Jackson.
Brief rebuttal. And that's exactly what we did. We did an audit on how those funds were expended. And what we found is that more money was going to a law firm to talk about how they moved the zoo than was actually being applied to the success of the zoo. And so, as we talk about, if you have to ask the question of is the zoo open, then the question is, why don't you support the zoo? Why haven't you gone there? You would know that we've had to turn people away. And if people are afraid, then how does it stand to reason that you're not afraid when there's beer at the zoo? And you're not afraid when there's ice cream at the zoo. But all of a sudden it's dangerous on another occasion. We have to market the zoo. We have to build an opportunity, and zoos it's common for zoos around the country to be in legacy communities like it is in the city of Jackson.
Ms. Wilson?
Yes, I would like to say, if people don't feel safe, they're not going. We have to be honest with ourselves. The administration can talk about all the different events that's held there, but I would love to see a financial document that states that there was a return on our investment, where there was a plus on our investment when we invest for those funds into the zoo. Okay. So the fact is that it's not safe in some instances, and we need to clean that area up and bring safety to those cities.
Thank you, and we'll get to crime in a second. Mr. Downey, are you familiar with the accreditation process for the reaccrediting the zoo? What are your plans if you would become congressman?
I'm at the zoo every day. I'm there every day. Every single day. I've been for 50 years, except when I lived in New York, Chicago. It was donated by my uncle, J.A. Hawkins, 100 years ago. And it's an absolute joke. I never can get an return phone call, and Kenneth calls him Lying Lumumba. I want to be nasty like Kenneth. But I asked him, and I think he remembers 3 years ago, and I thought, gosh, did he just say to y'all he wants to relocate the zoo? No, we don't need to move the zoo. Put a theme park there. Reopen the lake. It's been closed for 25 years. He told me, oh, Ponto, we're going to have paddle boats. It's not closed. It's open for fishing. It was a filth. It ain't never been open for fishing, not in the last 25 years. And give the underprivileged kids in West Jackson who are black something to do besides sell drugs. They can fish. Charge them $1 or $2. Put safety there.
So you're saying that folks in West Jackson sell drugs? Is that the choice of employment in West Jackson?
Drugs are everywhere. I live on Beach Street. It's right there by the zoo. It's wide open drugs every day, every night. Never changed.
Yeah, I have folks in West Jackson.
I got bullet holes in my house.
I have folks in West Jackson, and no drugs been sold on Aberdeen.
Well, there's drugs on West Capitol every day. Johnson Court, Beach Street, where I live. I promise you.
Okay, I digress. Go ahead.
Well, we don't need to move the zoo. Now, I could be wrong about that. Maybe Antar's correct. But we need to put patrolmen on horseback up and down West Capitol. 130 houses. We need to demolish 1,300 houses. There's 18,000 abandoned homes in Jackson, folks. Come on. That would be a start. I'm on his side. I want this city to be clean and safe. But 4 years, nothing has been done. Well, I'm saying nothing, a little bit. And 130 homes, that would definitely be a little bit. Repave the street. Put police officers on horseback, scooters, whatever. I think we can make the zoo prosper, excuse me, without white folks. I think we can. Black folks' money spends just like white. But put something at the zoo that's worthwhile, like a theme park, reopen it for fishing. I've been trying for years.
Let's transition. We're gonna transition to the dilapidated house that you.
Yeah, so I'm gonna get it, I think you're past your time.
Okay.
And I think it rolls into the next question that I was gonna talk about anyway, because you guys are kind of touching on the idea of the blight around the zoo, okay? And the conditions that you're talking about that might scare people, right? Now, I feel like I have to just put in there, and then I'm gonna ask the question, that there are reasons, historic reasons for a lot of that blight and the disinvestment, and frankly, white blight. And now, I know you're saying you live at the zoo, so all due respect, but beyond you, there are a lot of reasons for that. So if anybody wants to take up those reasons as we go forward through the questions, feel free to do that. But let me ask this question. So blight.
You asking me?
No, because I'm going to go into the next question, and then you're going to get your turn, and then you can kind of answer that. I just feel like it's almost a fact check in a way to put out that there are real reasons for that blight beyond just recent policy. So blight and dilapidated property limits economic development potential in a lot of our areas in our neighborhoods, as we know. And research shows can increase crime in those areas. And so we also understand that the state of Mississippi owns many of the crumbling buildings in the city of Jackson. I don't know where those numbers are now. I suspect the mayor may know, but it's been very large over the years. How specifically will each of you, if you become mayor or remain mayor, work with the state of Mississippi and others to reduce that blight so that we can reduce some of the problems that all of you are talking about? And I think I haven't started with the mayor a little bit. So
Well, I appreciate that question. I can share with you some of the recent efforts that took place. There was a blight elimination program that federal money went through the state that was intended to be utilized for a large sum of blight elimination. What we found is that the administrative costs for those blight partners, not the city of Jackson, we had to go in with blight partners, and it became too cumbersome. And that's why it didn't succeed. And I think that's where you see the challenge between policy makers and policy implementers. And so what we have been doing is introducing for the last several years legislation for a land bank which gives community the opportunity to have a larger say in what takes place in their neighborhood. As I've had the opportunity to go to different conferences and speak to different mayors, what I have found is that the issue of blight has been a least common denominator that frustrates many mayors across many cities. And so we found that the cities that have been most successful have been those cities who have been able to implement a land bank. And so there is some point of education that has to go forward so that we make sure that our legislative delegation understand just what that is. Understand that while we want to have some opportunity, that we end speculation in our community where people can own property, leave them in a derelict state, show no interest in the maintaining of that, so that we make sure that we can take it back in those circumstances. But at the same time, not penalize or not criminalize poverty. Those are things that are important to us, and I think that is how we need to shape our policy around blight elimination.
Mr. Wilson.
Sure. Well, clearly blight is a problem throughout this entire city. You look at the apartment buildings on South Jackson, South Jackson and West Jackson is plagued with it more than any other. As a neighborhood association president, we have worked together with other associations to try to find ways to resolve these matters with our city council. But what I think we should do with some of these properties that are able to be rehabs, I think we should offer those as incentives, similar to our Neighbors First program started by Mayor Yarber, to give to our police officers, our firefighters, our teachers, and our single mothers who are in need. I think that's a way for us to create a tax base. I think that's a way to incentivize them for those who are underpaid and underappreciated and overworked. So that would be something I'll be looking into in my administration. We're not gonna try to reinvent the wheel, but we are gonna try to make sure it works for all of Jackson.
Mr. Downing,
What's the question?
what you gonna do about blight?
What a joke, why?
And how are you gonna work with the
The
state of
city of
Mississippi
Jackson
who
is
owns a lot
behind
of
the
property?
blight.
Pardon?
There's about 6,000 homes in Jackson that are owned by the government. It used to be a code enforcement. I've been trying for 20 years to get something done in my neighborhood. I've spent $100,000 of my own money on property that's not even mine. And there's grants out there. Now, I don't want to name names and get people in trouble, but I've got information from his employees, people that work for the city of Jackson, who told me there were grants you could apply for. And most of those grants were connected, unfortunately, with his enemy, Tate Reeves, or the governor of Mississippi. There's a bunch of them. FAA's got one Jackson never applied for. Now, I'm not privy to all this stuff. He's smarter than I am. He's an attorney. But this city has been shafted big time. I'm telling people, hey, quit paying your taxes. See if that gets some attention. Because you're not getting your money's worth for anything. The bus is a joke. A total joke. Not even one bus that leaves the city. It just goes around inner city. The airport. Call it Thompson Field or Red Evers, whichever you please. It's 18 miles from Amtrak. It's a 50-mile cab fare. How come there's not a bus or a shuttle? Nobody wants to talk to Mr. Lumumba or whoever the mayor of Jackson is. We're like I said before, there's been an undeclared war on white folks in the Jackson metro area. We need to stop that, unify this city, make the mayor of Jackson complicit with whatever needs to move this city forward. Whether that's Republican, Democrat, Independent, I don't care. Reform Party, whomever. Make this city clean and safe for it's a shrinking city, 159,000 if the 2020 census ever comes out. We used to have 215,000. It's been shrinking for 40 years. I want to turn that around.
Okay, I'll give you 30 seconds. The one thing I do want to say is the one white moderator here, I have never known there to be a war on white people in Jackson. So, Mayor Lumumba.
First, I just wanted to clear up a few things. One, that I do not see Tate Reeves as my enemy. Governor Reeves and I have met on several occasions, just as I was able to work with Governor Bryant. In fact, right as he was newly elected, before he had been sworn into office, one of the first meetings that he had was to come to my office. I consistently talked to his chief of staff, and so we have had some communication challenges that I have spoken to, but we have not had a contentious relationship in that regard. Furthermore, as we talk about the buses, that's another thing that we can tout as an administration. We have nearly replaced the entire city of Jackson's bus fleet. And talking about how the route works, I think you should listen to some of our press conferences when we're asking residents to be a part of our new route study that we are putting forward so that we can understand how residents travel across our city. And so as we're commissioning not only our route study, but also one of the first comprehensive plans since 2001. 2001 was so long ago, that's when I graduated high school. And so we have things, as I said at the top of our discussion, that have either never happened in our city's history or haven't happened for quite some time.
Thank you, Mayor. We want to turn now to policing crime and violence prevention. I'm going to start off with a question along the lines of policing. It's not a very popular question. David Banner once said that blacks kill blacks for the same reasons that whites police kill blacks. And he got a lot of pushback from that. But what he meant was that there's this dehumanization of black lives. And we've been socialized based on, systemic institutional racism. We've been socialized to have these beliefs. In cities like Jackson's 80% black, police force about 70%, I imagine, black. Inevitably, you're gonna have black police officers killing unarmed African-American civilians. And that has been the case here in this city. But of course, we don't have the uprisings that we would normally have. So, Mr. Mayor, and we're gonna go across the stage, do you have any implicit bias trainings or any of these other types of trainings that have been incorporated across the country? Have you all incorporated any of those, or do you have any plans to do so?
What we have is a public safety task force that is working not only to deal with issues within our general orders, but also looking to produce a citizen review board. We want to be able to offer that so our citizens can have some opportunity. You know, this is one of those things, and I thank you for asking that question. I think that I've gotten a pretty unfair shake. I've been accused of not being a friend of police or having some issue with police, because I think that we have to be open and have transparency in our process. One of those things that we do is that anytime there is a death by an officer, we immediately submit that to a grand jury. And so that the court system has the opportunity to ascertain whether the shooting was justified or not. I have had opportunity, and I've had the necessary stance to terminate some people, or the police chief has, and you know, it has come to my desk after he's chosen to do so. And that is because while I'm not against police, I am against police brutality, and I am against police misconduct. And in this day and age, when we look at all of the things that are taking place around our world, I don't think that we have an option but to make sure that we have an inclusive and just police department that looks at community as a resource. I believe in the words of Ella Baker when she said, when you look deep into community, you find strength, not weakness. And so it is community that knows what dangers lurk in our communities. It is community that understands what young person is exhibiting behavior which is troubling. We have to also understand that violence is a disease. And so it can spread. And so we have to be able to interrupt the cycles that are taking place. That is why we have talked exhaustively, not only about how we better equip our police officers, not only having 5 times as many recruit classes as the prior administration. Sometimes the news that is most important is sometimes the news you don't get. I've talked with representatives from the Clarion Ledger who were looking on that issue that has been over-exaggerated about the attrition rate of our police department, only to find that as they compared cities of similar size, they found that Jackson actually was performing better. Now that doesn't mean that we're satisfied. We want to see more people enter into the profession, but we also understand that you can't simply out-police crime. That if we don't find a way in order for everyone to be engaged, not only the administration.
But Mayor, I don't want to cut you off, but how do you prevent those deaths before they happen?
Absolutely. So the way that you do it is that you use credible messengers. You use people who have seen those cycles and have witnessed the same trouble and have seen the unfortunate side of the criminal justice system, and use them to interact. Often I tell people that one reason that someone can rob you is because they don't have any relationship to you. That we have young people coming up in communities, young people who are hungry, young people who haven't been engaged and have grown divorced from our society, divorced from who we are as a people. And so whether or not you love them, they paint the picture of our city.
Thank you. We have to move on. Mrs. Downey. Mr. Downing, so the question is, what measures would you take to prevent the killing of unarmed African American civilians by police officers? Well, not just African Americans, but anybody.
I've been robbed, mugged, shot, and beaten 13 times, with the exception of one time, all on West Capitol Street. I've got metal all over my body from those muggings, beatings, and shootings.
Is this about police officers?
By criminals.
We're talking about police
officers. Every time
officers.
it's the same.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but we're talking about police officers. How do you prevent the biases that are associated with?
You've got to first replace Jimmy Davis. He doesn't think listen, the police are afraid of the crooks. The crooks are not afraid of the police. There's no fear of retribution or being incarcerated. It's the wild, wild west. I'm there, I live there. Automatic weapons fire every night. 190 cars running the streets of Jackson at 80 miles an hour. It made the news finally when the knuckleheads blocked the interstate.
Well, what does this have to do with the violence of the police? That he's talking about policing violence.
That's minuscule. The violence, listen, 2 or 3 times I could have prevented it had I been there at Jasco when the police shot some a 60-year-old guy with a knife. No, you don't do that. But those are minuscule to the problems that occur every day with 130 homicides in Jackson, Mississippi. Folks, I guarantee you, wake up. It's the crime capital of the country. Based on 160,000 population, nobody's even close.
We're gonna get to that. We're gonna get to that. We'll come back. Mr. Wilson.
Yes, sir. Well, you know, as a member of the community,